Good morning, everyone, and welcome you all to the People Matters and Right Management webinar on preparing your leaders for the human age. My name is Vikram, and I'm part of the People Matters team. At the very onset, I would like to thank you for attending the webinar. Today, we have with us a very experienced speaker, Gary Schmidt, who is the practice leader, talent management ASEAN at Right Management. Right Management is a global leader in career and workforce solutions within the Manpower Group. The firm designs and delivers solutions to align talent strategy with business strategy. It has over 3,500 employees working across more than 300 locations in over 50 countries. For more information about Right Management, you may visit their website, www.right.com. I will now pass it on to Tuhina Panda, Project Leader and Internal Change Management Manager, Right Management, to take over from here. Over to you, Tuhina.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Vikram. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar series on preparing your leaders for the human age. I apologize from our end once again that for the delay that we had, but we are back on. So to start off, I wanted to talk about the topic that we will be covering today, and the discussion will aim to answer some of the queries that probably everyone has in their mind as to what are we planning for, what is the new things that are going on in today's world, especially in the space of leader assessment. So the points that we would want to kind of try and address today are what is the current scenario and the paradigm in which we are working today. As you know, there are so many changes that have happened across the globe, whether it's to do with technology, whether it's to do with the kind of people, organizations, the way we operate, and just probably even just the purpose or the objective of the organization. So in this scenario, what is the relevance of leader assessment, and what does it look like in today's world for us? To understand this in a much more deeper manner, we will also want to understand what is leader assessment going to look like probably going forward in the years to come. And to talk about all these issues, these challenges and these issues, I'd like to invite our presenter, Gary Schmidt, to talk about these key agenda points. Before I pass it on to Gary, I'd like to introduce him and share a little bit about him. Dr. Gary Schmidt is a practice leader for talent management in the Asia and Southeast Asian nations region for Right Management. He is currently based out of Singapore and is a talent management expert for over 20 years and has been working as a consultant, business executive, and researcher. He has managed and developed a wide range of programs to enhance worker productivity in large global companies and mid-sized organizations. His key experience includes the areas of leader development, high potential identification development, executive assessment, coaching, employee engagement, assessments, team building and development, succession planning, and change management, to mention a few of those areas. So with this, I'd like to pass it on to Gary, and he will take you through today's presentation. We'll have a small, short Q&A session after his presentation, so I'd request you to keep your questions till then, and we'll try to address as many as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuhina. Thank you, everyone. This is Gary Schmidt, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with you today about this important and fun topic. I've got a slide here that says, "The war for talent is over and talent has won." Well, it was well over 10 years ago now that McKinsey came out with their famous article about the war for talent. And since then, we've been watching the trends. We've been seeing what's happening around the world and really seeing that McKinsey was right, that talent is key, but we also say talent has a new definition. Now, if we look at some of the work that our parent organization, Manpower, organization has been looking at. They've been tracking a lot of the global workforce changes around the world and have encapsulated that message in what they call the human age. So we're moving from the Industrial Revolution through the data and digital age into the human age. And there are four key elements that drive that conclusion of why we're stepping into the human age. The first we call talentism. And this is where McKinsey was right with regards to the war for talent. I mean, if you look at by 2015, Europe is going to have twice as many people over age 65 as under age 15. China at that time will have, the number of people over age 65 will be larger than the entire U.S. population is today. So big shifts in demographics. In fact, in Manpower's recent talent shortage survey that was done with over 35,000 employees or employers across 36 countries, over a third of them said they're struggling to find the right talent to help meet the demands of this changing world. So what is changing? Well, there's a global readjustment going on, and all of you who read the financial sections of the newspaper, keep up with the news, know that there are big shifts going on around the world. Economic power is changing. BRIC countries are growing rapidly. Demographic shifts in the existing markets and in the emerging markets. So there are some large changes going on that is impacting the business models and the social structure, and really putting a greater emphasis on the human potential as a major agent of economic growth. Now, what that's leading to is the result of that is some social bifurcation. And by that, having some of those global economic shifts and the impact of globalization is resulting in, some countries becoming a little more protectionist, other countries seeing a greater gap between the haves and the have-nots, and a lot of the emerging markets seeing a huge explosion of the middle class. And if we just focus on that, that's what's happening in India, in China, and Brazil, and other countries. That explosion of the middle class means that there's a different type of worker needed, more technicians, more builders, people to help with the development of the infrastructure to support that new middle class. And of course, on top of all that, we need managers and leaders who can make those things happen. So big social impact. And of course, what made a lot of this happen is the technology revolution. I mean, having rapid access to information and ideas that can circle the globe in fractions of a second just has really unleashed the whole human potential. And hence, technology is really the underpinning of what's moving into the human age. But that is changing the need in organizations and the demand the leaders have to have. Instead of being big and powerful and secretive, organizations need to be open and fast and agile and transparent. Instead of looking at the workforce as just mass quantities of workers in various roles and jobs, if we're addressing the talent needed to be successful, and if there's a scarcity of that talent, that means organizations are going to have to look at talent in a different way, a more human way, at a more human level. And so those are some of the key changes that are really shaping how we as human resource specialists and talent managers are facing the world. Well, here's a quick view of what the talent mismatch is looking like. And this is a result of some of the Manpower work. If you look at the arrow in the middle, imagine lower level jobs right up through senior executives at the very top. The blue section of the graph shows the demand for skill. So in all parts of the world, there are greater demands for higher levels of technical skills, managerial skills, higher levels of expertise. But you can see in the green shaded area, the supply of talent is more that triangle shape. And so what that's leading to is we have a lack of resources at the higher end that's creating a tension and high demand in the skills market area, the emerging markets, the mature markets. At the same time, we've got an oversupply of low or wrongly skilled resources that are being underutilized and underemployed, and hence some of that social bifurcation that I referred to earlier. So that's creating tensions of who are the people out there who can be workers, what types of jobs are needed, and how many workers can fill those roles. So what does that mean, and where do we go forward here? Well, this is why Jeff Joris at Manpower talks about talent as the new it, this talentism in the human age being critical for the next decade or so. There's a pressure, companies have felt a pressure to do more with less, and hence they're looking at ways to get greater potential out of the people they have. So talent is being addressed, and the human capital is being addressed almost like economic capital. It's a scarce resource. And organizations are searching around the world to identify it. Nation and corporations means of attracting, mobilizing, liberating talent can be a key competitive differentiator. And human talent is going to be, one of those major agents to the economic growth. It's going to continue. Not just has it been the last few years, but will continue. What it means if organizations want to corner the market and be successful and create competitive advantage, that they need to think about how they're going to corner the market on some of that talent, how they can identify it, develop it, engage it, and then keep it so it's not poached away by other organizations who also are looking for that same talent. So what's this going to look like? If talent is the new it, how do things change? If we go from the industrial information age, we're moving into the human age, where the focus is on talent versus perhaps just capital. It used to be that differentiators were who could make the capital expenses for the big equipment or the best technology. But now people have the equipment, and many of the organizations have the technology, and the differentiator is who can operate it most efficiently, who can fix it, who can operate it safely and reliably. And those are the organizations that are being successful in this competition. And that key competitive edge is how they identify, develop, and lead their talent. So I'm not reading through all of these epic shifts, but you can see that down that list there's some key things that are going to be changing. Instead of workers chasing companies, companies will be chasing workers. Instead of having talent gluts, there'll be talent shortages for the type of skills that are going to be needed in the future. Instead of being lean and mean and trying to really make the organization as most efficient as possible, organizations will need to be looking outside to identify what the competitive landscape is, who the talent is, hiring people with passion, not just power, to help get things done. So as we enter this dawn of the human age, what impact is that going to have? Well, it means we as organizations have to take a one-size-fits-one approach. We can't just have blanket processes and procedures, but we really need to target what motivates the type of talent that we need. And if it's going to be hard to find and buy talent, we need to think about how we're going to identify young talent and raw talent, and how do we grow that talent. But that's a harder task. It's like trying to identify which is the best seed that can grow into a tall and powerful tree, rather than just picking out trees that are already grown. So new challenges that are more difficult. Of course, leadership is going to play a key role in all of that, because they'll be the ones tasked with identifying, cultivating, and unleashing that human potential in the workplace. And that leaders are going to have to connect the individual human potential with the ambitions of the organization really engage and unleash that power if they're going to make the organizations successful and competitive. So what's that mean for me or for you? Well, it means if we're going to win in this world of work, no matter where we are around the world, we're going to be having to look at a new breed of leader and a new emphasis on what leadership means. So that brings us to the case of assessment, because if we're looking at new leaders and we have to identify young potential to refine that raw talent into leaders of the future, we need reliable, valid tools and techniques. Now, these questions are not that new questions. I mean, the conference board every year does a CEO challenge. And what I've shown here, the top 5 things, strategies that CEOs are worrying about today in making their organizations competitive. And number 1, human capital. They see the human age. They see the importance of unleashing that human potential. And so they see it as a top priority for their organizations. All the little red check marks are all identifying areas where human capital and human potential are important. And so you can see it's not just in human capital, but operational excellence, innovation, customer relations. All of those areas to some degree need people to be successful. Now, if we drill in to the human capital strategy itself, what are organizations doing around the world? And so here, the conference board and their 2013 CEO challenge show the rank ordering of different strategies for managing human capital in the rank order of Asia, Europe, and the US. So you can see number 1, grow talent internally. Second one, globally, provide employee training, development, raise employee engagement, and so forth. Emphasis on talent, emphasis on growing talent, engaging talent, unleashing potential. So, back to what we do in terms of our areas. Well, we've got 2 strategies that we can always employ with regards to talent management. One is we can buy talent, and the other is we can build it. So we can always buy talent for performance. And this is buying what I call refined talent. People who have experience, people who have track record, and people who can step into the role right away. Secondly, I can build talent. I can look for people with potential, young talent, that raw talent, and find ways to help build, grow, so that they're going to be ready as our future leaders. And assessment can help with both of those areas. I mean, assessment can help with selection, whether it's buying talent or building talent, because it helps us in a valid and reliable way verify the skills, abilities, and the styles that differentiate top potential leaders and top performing leaders from others. Also, it's useful for development because it helps us identify where leaders' development needs are. And we found through our research in employee engagement that one of the key ways to engage top talent is to help them grow and develop and reach their full potential. So assessment can help the organization identify who to bring on board. It can help the individuals identify areas for their development, areas of strength that they need to further develop to really unleash that potential. So that's why the renewed interest in assessment. Now, here's some data. Does assessment work, right? So I've got some information provided here, selecting people with just normal interviews, 1 to 2 interviews. The hit rates are about 70 to 72%, pretty good if we're structured interviews, interviewing for the right skills. But if we can use multiple assessment instruments, assessment center type approaches, where we're adding psychometric assessments around work skills and personalities, business simulations, other pieces of evidence, we can see that success rate can increase upwards of 20% in getting the right person on the job. Again, in the war for talent, trying to find the key talent that we need, those percentage differences could really mean a big difference in terms of performance. Now, this is 2001 data, so things haven't changed. We've known this for a while, but it re-emphasizes the need to be able to use valid and reliable tools to help identify that talent. I think the difference going forward is the type of talent that we'll be looking for, the types of skills, and how we measure that talent. Some of you may have seen this along the way. Again, this type of validity correlation ladder has been around for a while, and it shows a range of 0 correlation to a validity of 1.0, which is perfect correlation, perfect prediction about hiring the right person. And so we can look at the ladder as we move from the bottom to the top. We find tools that are more and more valid, help us make better and more accurate decisions the higher we go. Now, all these tools have some strengths and weaknesses. They do something very well, but there's some drawbacks to some of them. So what we found, like others who use assessment centers, if we can put a package together using multiple assessors, multiple tools, that we can take advantage of the strengths of all of the individual assessment techniques while minimizing some of the drawbacks that they have, and ultimately provide better, more accurate, and more valid assessment. So, hence, some assessment's good, but a whole person assessment is better when you really want to be sure you're making the right decisions. All right, so the old carpenter was right. Old carpenter wisdom says, well, measure twice, cut once, right? The more we measure and get the same information, the more confident that our information is reliable. Assessment centers work on that same principle. We have multiple assessors who work together, discuss, and agree what their observations mean, identifying consistencies and inconsistencies of behavior. We use multiple methods, again, to take advantage of the strengths and minimize the weaknesses of those different approaches. And we focus on the same leadership competencies and behaviors. We're trying to measure the same things with these various techniques. And when we put that all together, we've got valid, reliable, and fair measurement. So that's the backdrop. That's the need while there's an acceleration of interest in looking at leader assessment. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about Right Management's Leader Evolution Center. How do we take some of those principles and put them into practice? Well, if some of you have been involved in traditional assessment centers, you know that they're a lot of work. Lots of logistics to be organized. Travel, rooms, materials, hotels, food, transportation. That can accelerate some of the costs. Getting all the assessors online. And in the end, to manage all of those things, we tend to reduce some of the capacity. So we're not overwhelmed by that. So they are, kind of hard work. And in the end, well, many of the traditional assessment centers have not been updated, and they don't reflect today's fast-paced, agile, dynamic workplace, making use of a lot of the technologies and tools available to today's leaders and managers. So we need to make some updates. We need to use some of these technologies. We need to implement them, and assessment centers are one of the ways that we can do that. In fact, many of you, if you're using assessment centers, probably half of you out there are already incorporating technology to some degree. Now, if I were talking to you 5-6 years ago, that'd probably be half that number. So the amount of technology and the regularity in which it's being used in assessment centers is growing rapidly, and we're on that upswing at the moment. But use of technology really is a neutral in this. It doesn't add to our measurement accuracy, and nor does it take away. So while we add technology to the assessment process, we really have to be careful that we're still following the same traditional best practices and hallmarks of what makes an assessment center a very reliable and valid approach to identifying leaders and leader potential. So, what are some ways that technology helps? Well, it makes it scalable. We can run more people through at a time. Distributed delivery, we can do it virtually with many people around the world without having to deal with travel. Fast cycle time. We can get results turned around much quicker than in the past. By using some of the technology available to us, we've got greater standardization and control, whether we're all together in one venue or we're distributed in different parts of the country or the region. Role fidelity is that we can really focus on exactly the types of competencies and the types of business challenges that leaders are facing. And it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. Different approaches, different cases, different uses of assessment to help identify the skills that we need. Of course, the key driver of this is reduced costs. And if we can take a lot of cost out in travel, et cetera, on the logistics side, that makes it more available to more managers and more people to use some of these techniques. And we're also able to get increased stakeholder involvement. So they're more interested in helping identify what are the skills, building the cases, making it feel like it's, a high-touch process, not just a high-tech process. So stakeholders being very much involved in how this is put together, communicated, and followed up. And finally, it has high organizational impact because it can touch more people and you're getting the benefits of the higher validity, the impact on performance and productivity and strong leader behaviors, the ability to grow your own leaders, having big impact on today's organizations. So what does our center look like? Well, we have participants go through basically a day in the life of a leader. In fact, I tend to think of it as more a month in the life, kind of compressed into a single day, in which people are getting emails that they have to respond to. They go through people challenges, dealing with direct reports that, have a performance review, maybe need some coaching. They have to negotiate resources with their peer because they live in the matrix. And it's not position power, but it's influence and power that helps get things done. They may have to deal with customers who are frustrated about issues. And of course, they have to think strategically, put together a business plan, and have that reviewed with their boss. So all these are key elements and activities, and we include all of these, plus some of the traditional approaches like interviews and psychometrics and maybe 360s to help provide even additional data points. Now, we use these techniques to measure these competencies that are important for the human age, those that are important for future leaders to be successful, and we drop all of that inside a technology platform so that we've got a sophisticated, high-tech approach to measure these things in a way that feels like a normal day at work in today's environment, and frankly, that something is more fun and engaging for the participants to go through as well. So what do we measure? Well, here's a menu of some of the leader competencies that we can measure in our executive level Leader Evolution Center. Now, we've bucketed these under strategy, people, and execution dimensions, but you can see there are many competencies and new ones that were not seen a few years back, like global awareness and market savvy. We also have competencies for the middle manager, for identifying that early talent who might be important in managing managers. So there are thinking skills, of course, execution and leading, relating to others, building relationships, communicating, learning, adapting, and finally introducing that global mindset, because it's not just the area of senior leaders, but really anybody who's a middle manager or works in shared services can benefit from having a global mindset. So we include that in the center as well. And then we have our day in the life activities. So typical to a normal day, you sit down in front of the PC, you log in, and you realize I have a series of emails that have stacked up. Also, emails come in throughout the day. So the assessment center becomes a dynamic experience, not just a fixed experience dealing with what's in my in-basket, but dealing with the dynamics of the day of what's in my inbox. Role plays allow us to look at that important interpersonal and communication component. We can see how they express themselves, influence, negotiate, calm down others, etc., through our role plays. We want to know how people think, both execution but also strategy. So we have people go through and prepare a business presentation and then deliver it, because those are two different sets of skills. And so we're able to incorporate that, whether it's face-to-face in this picture situation or through webinars and virtual classrooms where presentations can be made. And finally, we generally finish these with the structured interviews. So we have a chance to break role, if you will, into the business simulation, and now talk about actual experiences that the person has had in their past, challenges they'll be facing, in some of the key competencies, and perhaps areas for development they feel they'll need if they'll be successful as a leader. So these are some of the activities that we include. And here's an example of our capability by exercise matrix. This is where we organize and link together the different capabilities that we want to measure, such as strategy, people, and execution, against the different type of measurement techniques. So again, Assessment Center has multiple methods and multiple assessors. Well, you can see we have inbox, customer meeting, peer meeting, direct report meeting, and so forth. And those are done by maybe 2 to 3 different assessors. So they each form their own opinions based on the observations they make, and those are pooled together to come up with overall scores against each of the capabilities being measured by the Leader Evolution Center. So, what are some of the key characteristics? Real-life simulation, technology-driven, a bit more scalable. We can run 4 to 8 participants a day. Typically, there are 2, for each assessor, 2 participants. Participants do use their technology. So whether they're downloading pre-work or completing psychometric assessments as part of pre-work, or actually doing the entire center virtually, of course, they're making use of their computer. We have interactions with assessors. Could be on the phone, could be webinar, could be face-to-face. But those are key in getting communication skills. So we have a combination of really complex real-world business simulations delivered on a virtual platform. And the story we use, whether it's at the executive or mid-level, is a U.S.-based engineering company working in a global environment, dealing with many of the challenges that your organizations may be facing. What we found is that some organizations look at that case, say it's a engineering products manufacturing company, I'm a pharmaceutical company or a high-tech company or a hospitality organization. So that doesn't really feel like it addresses my challenges. But actually, once they start reading through the case and they see the types of challenges and decisions that leaders make, they see how some of that transports to their own business challenges. And so often at times they use the Leader Evolution Center materials just as they are. They may use all of these simulation activities as well to measure the competencies they're interested in. And of course, all that's being mapped back against their profile of success. Well, that's what it looks like for the organization. What's the experience for the participants? Well, here I've got 2 different schedules, one for a mid-level manager evolution center and the other for the executive level. So both start at 9 And at 4:30 or 5:30 in the afternoon, you can see how the different exercises are broken out, how they're a little bit different. Throughout the day, emails are coming into their inbox, and they're asked to respond to those. So their written communication, email communication evidence is building up. They have to prepare for certain meetings throughout the day, and eventually they have to prepare for their meeting with their boss at the end of the day to talk about some of the challenges that they'll be facing and how they will face those. So that's what a typical day looks like. Here's some snapshots of the materials. So this product manufacturing company is a fictitious company we call MCO. And as pre-reading, people get to log in the day before the center begins and start reading through case materials to get to know their new organization and their new job and colleagues. When they start the center and they sit down and log in at their PC, they get an interface that looks pretty traditional to the work desktop. They've got their inbox. They've got emails coming in, emails they can respond to. Some may have attachments. They have a calendar that keeps them informed about what will be going on when throughout the day. So they're not shuffling paper. It's all on their desktop. They've got access to resource materials and documents like an organization chart or a performance review of one of their direct reports. So these are things they can refer back to anytime they need right off their desktop. And finally, if they need to be reminded about what this case is about, who they are, what are the challenges, there's always a help screen that brings them back to the instructions they got at the beginning. So you are Pat Silva, Regional Director in the Midwest. You've been in the role for 4 weeks, taking over for Jerry, who's recently retired, and so forth. So it tells you about your role and some of the things that you're asked to do. You have a total of approximately 5 hours to read through these items and accomplish the following objectives. Develop a 6 to 9 month territory plan. Address urgent issues. Prepare for and meet with your direct report, your peer, and your boss. So those are the challenges that they're facing. I've stuck a little note on here to say we can do some tailoring for the regions, for the industries, to add additional realism, add additional face validity. But oftentimes organizations are content by having this fictitious company that we use. Oftentimes it levels the playing field for candidates if we're in an industry that's different from the one the organization's in. So their first inclination is it doesn't look like mine. Their second thought, once they think a little more deeply, is about actually that's not a bad thing. Let's put them in a new situation, but with similar challenges that we're facing. So that's the participant experience. So they complete the center and they're done, and then it's the attention turns to outputs and reports. So the types of outputs that can be provided include some of the integrated feedback report. That's a written report that highlights strengths, development opportunities, and recommendations for moving forward. Individual feedback and coaching sessions. We work, especially in development, we work with potential leaders to build a personal strategic plan. This is beyond just an individual development plan, but looking further out into the future in what we call a feed-forward approach to really help them identify strategies for their career as a leader. And, of course, we like to have a three-way guided development plans with managers, participants, and the assessor coaches so they can make use of this information. Quick snapshots of what the reports look like. Here's an example of a report on an individual. Overall analysis, graphics of competency scores, recommendations of readiness and engagement and mobility, and so forth. So you get a nice snapshot overall, and of course there's much more detailed information that can be provided underneath. Now that's previously at the individual level. Here's across the group level. So if you're really looking for talent and top talent, perhaps trying to spot high potentials, you can get a grid like this that shows you how all of your participants who've gone through the center really stack up, and helps you identify maybe areas where everyone could benefit from development activities, maybe helping you identify some that are particularly ready for leadership vacancies that may be coming up soon. And here's a quick snapshot of the personal strategic plan. This is something we like to take almost a day after the center, working with participants to really build out their strategic plan. We found not only does that help provide some clarity on how they can develop themselves over time, but it can also improve engagement as they align their personal strategy with that of the organization, what it has available for them. Very quickly, let's step back. This is how we put one of these together. We look at the leader success profile in your organization, make sure that's valid and up to date and future focused. We put the assessment center process together and configure it, not just an off-the-shelf process. Of course, we deliver that once it's configured. Feedback and coaching is provided. Development activities are follow-up and accelerated. And we measure the impact on the individual, how their behaviors have changed, how that's changed the performance metrics in the organization. All of that requires a good communication strategy beforehand, during, and after. And once we've got all that put together, then the focus is on execution. And that's around making sure the assessment process is up to date, keeping it current, and delivering, of course. Now, today I've shown you just some snapshots of this, but to get a really good feel for how it works and the dynamic nature of it, I do urge you to contact Right Management Office and go in or request a demo. So you can sit at the desktop, respond to some of the emails, get a sense of the actual participant experience. Of course, there's some key benefits that we feel are important from the center. Really focused on future business objectives and those future leadership requirements. It's a process that's standardized, it's robust. We've used it in many languages, used it in all regions of the world. So it's reliable, easy to administer, scalable, so we can get many people going through it. And of course, Wright has assessors around the world, so we can scale up from the assessor point of view. The simulation is very current, very realistic, and simulates today's work challenges and environments. It adds fairness to the process. People really get engaged. Leaders really appreciate the feedback that they receive. And of course, that has payoffs in development for the candidates and for the organization. Some things that make it different than other options that you've got out there is our focus on a forward-looking approach and really trying to spot what leadership potential looks like. Not just focusing on current leaders, but what are those little differences that help us spot talent for the future? Because remember, it's the CEOs trying to figure out how to build talent and utilize who they have and keep the top talent they have. So that really helps. We use a very robust, proven technology platform. It's been around for 5-6 years. It's been used globally, been used with many global organizations, so it's a proven technology. We've introduced some new measures like global mindset and global competencies to address the globalization that's happening in all organizations. We have a strong integration with the systematic approach to leader development. It's not just an assessment and feedback and ends there. We move to steps to create behavior change in these future leaders. We want to see that leadership potential become not raw talent, but refined talent and become unleashed. And so we're experts in talent development, and so the assessment is just the beginning of that overall process. Now, one of the hallmarks of Wright is we do tailor our methods and techniques to your needs and competencies. So we've got an opportunity to be flexible, to partner, and provide you with a tailored solution. that's a good fit. And of course, we're a global organization. That means we've got to operate around the world in multiple languages. And this center is ready to go for that. In fact, here's a sampling of how some of the organizations are currently using the Leader Evolution Center. Of course, they're using it for selection and development programs of their leaders, increasingly being used for high potential selection and development. I would say a few years ago, more at the executive, today a bit more at the middle management level. As the scalable cost is coming down, more people can be run through this. Starting to focus on specific types of roles like sales managers or procurement managers. So what are the key competencies there, and how can we make some modifications to our existing cases to reflect those unique requirements of those unique roles? We're looking at ways of integrating. In fact, some organizations have their own 360s, and so we have integrated their 360s into our process, so we don't have to have multiple measures or redundant measures. Virtual assessment across geographies. Again, having people working out of their home offices or other offices rather than flying into a central location. That's being more and more common. And people really appreciate the fact that at the end of an assessment center, they don't have to get in a taxi, drive to the airport, fly home, another taxi to get home. When the center ends, then they log off, they're at home. And I know a lot of people who go through these appreciate that. Of course, we have half-day programs that can be extracted from the traditional programs. We also have train the trainer, train the assessor programs. Many organizations want their own leaders to assess future talent because they're responsible for developing and growing it. So by being an assessor, they have greater responsibilities in the decision of how to select and develop that talent. So those are some new ways that organizations are looking at talent. So I know we're a little bit over time, and I apologize again for the late start as well, but it's a good time to manage any questions at this point if there are some questions out there. So, Tahina.
Hi, Gary. I'm here. So we are open to question, guys. So I think you can. There is a small chat box at the right-hand column where you can just type in your questions and we can answer them. And since we have gone a little over time, what we can do is just consolidate some of your questions and answer a few of the key themes, and then maybe in terms of additional questions, we can answer them and reach out to you later. So, okay.
So I see one question come through, Dina,
Yeah.
about the Train the Assessor program. And typically, those Train the Assessor programs are a one-day program with some pre-reads. The assessors need to be familiar with the competencies and the definitions, but they need to become familiar with the exercises. Typically, in-house assessors do not also play the role-playing role. They're just strictly assessors. So we have other people engage in the role plays. We also have other people write up the reports. So we do have some, consulting support as needed around the center, but we do do the training of the assessors. Now, the key thing, the training is, again, knowing the competencies, knowing the exercises, but then we have lots of practice to calibrate ratings. So if they watch a video of someone in a role play, all of the assessors should come up with the same rating based on the same observations. And so we spend some time calibrating and honing those skills so that when the center actually begins, which is typically the next day, so it's fresh in the assessor's mind, that they can apply those skills immediately. There's a secondary benefit by that training, by the way, too, is that they take some of that assessor training and the fact that they avoid typical assessor errors and they've improved some of their assessor accuracy, and they apply that to observations they make in performance reviews or other observations on the job. It's actually quite a good learning experience for senior leaders who are in those assessor roles. Now, the cost, of course, that's something that's dependent on the time, on the customization of the materials and so forth, whether that's needed or not. So that's something we can chat with you more about afterwards, because there is a range of what that could look like. But some organizations are looking at that so they can take on more of those assessor responsibilities.
We have a second question which is coming from Shruti Singh. She has asked, how frequently should talent assessments be reviewed?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, if I just look at what most psychometric assessments or other assessments say is what is the shelf life in assessment, you get a range from maybe 1 or 2 years for those types of assessments. I'm going to say that it would depend on the career movement of the individual. So if you're familiar with the concept of leadership pipeline and the switch from individual contributor to manager, manager to manager of managers, to senior leader and leader of enterprises, I think that as the assessments or as the types of role and the responsibilities that go along with that have significant change, that's the time where an additional assessment can take place. Now, in the case of high potentials, you can actually conduct assessments, and I'll say at 3 points in time, just to make it simple. One is an early talent assessment. So what are the key work styles, behaviors, cognitive thinking skills that they bring in, given that they may not have much work experience? But what is the absolute raw talent they bring? The second level of assessment for middle managers starts to look at things like learning agility and adaptability, because now they have some work experience and we expect them to be able to make decisions, overcome challenges about execution, find ways to influence others in a matrix to get things done. And then finally, for senior executives, we expect that visionary, inspirational leader. So they can delegate many of the operational, executional activity, but they should have an outwardly looking focus, a vision of the future, a clear sense of the values that they want to bring to the organization, and be able to communicate that in a very polished and inspiring way. And so that is a different set of skills we look at as well. So that gives you a sense of how the assessment would change based on where one is in their career and the type of leader that you're looking for.
Gary, we have a few more questions that have come in. So
okay.
The other one is, the third question is from Priya Loknath. She has asked that could this also be used for succession planning?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the outcomes of this is that individuals have their development plans and maybe a sense of what they need to do to prepare themselves to be ready. The organization has that individual assessment sheet that it can say, are they ready now? Where are their strengths? Where are their experiences? And frankly, what do they need to improve to become battle tested to the next level of leadership? One of the ways of accelerating development of leaders is actually putting them in job roles that start stretching and challenging. So it's often used in succession management to identify people and high potentials particularly who could see a vacancy that's upcoming as, number one, a development opportunity in an area that they have not yet experienced, but an area that the risks around putting that person there is mitigated because you know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and you can create some safety nets and helpful resources around them so they can get through those first few months which are critical in making a change in that position. So you can accelerate some of your talent development, you can fill some of your key vacancies in succession planning, and you can do that in a way that mitigates risks to both the individual and the organization.
Okay, Gary, I think there's another question which has come in, is from Jagadish Ravichandran. He's asked, how does the keyword domination help the leaders?
The keyword domination, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'd request, Jagadish, if you could please clarify your question a little bit more.
I mean, I can speculate a little bit, but I'm a little hesitant to do so.
Okay. He's probably tried to clarify, saying, how he's mentioned that in regard to your subordinates, how would you kind of, I think, translate the word for a leader?
Well, I think if we're looking at the traditional direct and control as a management technique of others, I think that the skills that middle managers really need to lead and to learn to be effective leaders is the more compelling, influential argument rather than relying on position power. And if that's what domination means, that I have the power and the authority to compel you to do something, of course people will do it. But as soon as you leave the room, they may change their behaviors right back again. And so if we're really developing and empowering people, leaders have to find ways to not just you will dominate, control, or compel people, but to address some of the deeper motivations and emotions that they have, so that they're doing it because they want to, not because they have to. And so that's the challenge that the senior leaders have in terms of identifying, well, what is it that can help keep our top talent inspired, where they want to be here, they want to be part of the team, they want to help the organization be successful, rather than they have to. Because frankly, when top talent, particularly and top leadership talent, have options, and they can go to other organizations, they'll go to organizations where they don't feel like they're being told what to do, but can actually participate and more quickly shape things, especially in these rapid emerging markets. I mean, I know in Singapore here, we see, the research that places Vietnam, China, maybe India is similar, where young managers expect to be promoted not every 3 to 5 years like typical in the United States, but every 18 months. And so, having a directing and controlling leadership style is not going to be as effective with that new workforce.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. I think we have we'd want to close the session now, since we have already gone a few minutes over time. But we'd be happy to answer any of your questions directly, and you could write into the People Matters team or even to us, and we'd be happy to take some of your questions. Thank you everyone for joining in, and I want to request you to please join us on the 8th, which is the next Tuesday, for our second webinar, which is part of the series. On the 8th, we will be talking more about strategic development through leader assessment, and we have another one of our senior leaders who will be taking that session for us, Sean Deneen, who is a principal consultant with Right Management. With this, I'd like to thank Gary for taking time out to, take the session for us. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And over to you, Vikram.
Sure. Thank you, Gary, for enlightening us with your vast experience and how to ensure that our leadership development plans are successful in the human age. I'm positive that, like me, everyone attending the webinar has found the insights immensely valuable and will take these learning bags as an active part of our everyday thinking process. Also, thank you to Hina for moderating the session. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for attending the webinar. With this, we bring this webinar to a close, and while I hope that you found the webinar useful, please be sure to send us any feedback that you may have. Thank you.